This is the Be Helpful Podcast, where conversations with budding entrepreneurs prepare you for the wild journey of building a business or side hustle. Hey guys, welcome back to the Be Helpful Podcast. This is season 7. It's kind of crazy to say that I've had 36 of these incredible conversations with entrepreneurs, and we're about to kick off season 7 with another great one. I sit down with Jarie Bolander. He's an entrepreneur, an author, and also a host of the Entrepreneur Ethos, which is a podcast. It's a great podcast, so check it out. In this conversation, we dive into AI. We talk about what creativity is. Jarie is an engineer doing marketing, so I think he has a very unique and interesting perspective on the world of storytelling and B2B sales. The other thing I really enjoy about this conversation is we're just kind of flowing and chatting about the world of entrepreneurship, as we both interview entrepreneurs all the time and we just love the space. Unfortunately, the conversation had to get cut short because Jarie had to attend to a work meeting, but I did want to plug his book. He has a memoir for his late wife that's coming out on September 5th. So please go check that out. Just a great guy, great conversation. I think you guys will enjoy the episodes. We're going to split it into 2 episodes. And I think you'll really enjoy it. And as always, leave a review letting us know what you learned. And again, welcome back at season 7. Let's get started. All right. Today I get to sit down with Jarie Bolander. He's a serial entrepreneur, an author, and honestly, just talking to him for over the last couple of weeks, a really cool guy.
Appreciate that, man. Thank you.
No problem. So welcome. I want to dive right in. And before we start talking entrepreneurship and your experience, I start every conversation with, what did you want to be growing up?
What did I want to be? Wow. There were many things, actually. First thing I wanted to be was a fighter pilot. And actually pursued being a pilot when I was 18. I actually got my private pilot's license when I was 19, I think. And then was like, yeah, I'm going to go in the military, do all this cool stuff. And then, I met a girl and changed all that. As so many stories, met a girl, right? But aside from that, it was, engineering. My dad was an engineer, so our house, we were always building stuff, tearing stuff apart. He was an electrical engineer. I became an electrical engineer. So yeah, just love to tinker and do stuff. So I'm like, I guess engineers do that. So I'll go to school and, got a degree in electrical engineering and spent the first part of my career designing computer chips, manufacturing computer chips, just stuff around semiconductor physics and semiconductor business. So very different than what I do now, which we'll talk more about. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
Got it. So for the people, what do you do now? And help me paint the picture of how you went from semiconductor chips and being kind of an engineer into this weird, ridiculous lifestyle that we all choose of being entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So when I got out of college, I went to a startup, Silicon Valley in the mid 90s. And so everyone was in the semiconductor business. Chips were a big thing. They were starting to build the internet, back in 95 to, I don't know if it really started in 95, but everyone was building chips. That's what was being funded because all these computers, people were buying computers. So it's kind of the dawn of the personal computer. Then the dawn of the internet was around, 2000 was when the internet started to really take off. So the short answer is I'm unmanageable. I'm really just not, I don't like authority. I'm pretty curmudgeon-y about that. And I just wanted an independent life, and I wanted to just work hard. And I got sucked into the Silicon Valley dream, hey, get some stock options and be rich one day,
Yeah.
Turns out that's not the case. The job's a little bit more complex than that. And most of us don't make the huge exit you see. That's, I think, the fallacy that, you know, at least on what I try to tell young entrepreneurs and what I try to tell people on my podcast as well. It's like, this is something just got to love for the love of it. You know, you can make a good living and maybe you get lucky and get an exit or become wildly successful and rich, but chances are that's not going to happen. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, spent the better part of my career doing engineering and startups and semiconductors and biotech and, you know, sensors and IoT and all this sort of stuff. And then I met another girl, got married, and when she got sick with leukemia, I had to start running her business. And that was a PR, marketing, and strategic communications business, which for an engineer is like the dark side, right? I mean, like, come to the dark side, 2-drink minimum for marketing, right? So I started to do that. And it turns out I was really good at it. And one of the reasons I was really good at it is because, one, I write okay. Like, to me, writing is just fun and I can bang it out. And two, I could explain complex things simply. And tech marketing and startups are notoriously horrible at trying to explain what they do. And so just naturally like, oh, wow, you understand this stuff. I said, yeah, this stuff's not that hard. And they're like, what do you mean? We have this SaaS product and this beautiful. So I go, come on, I've built DNA sequencing chips. This is nothing compared to that. So let's just level set. Like, it's not, you know, you have another great tool, another great MarTech stack tool or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Fine. Okay. Not that hard. So yeah, I went to the dark side pretty, you know, back then. And so I first started running, her name was Jane, my late wife, 7 years ago. She died 6 years ago, actually, from leukemia, which obviously, as you can imagine, sucks.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, it's just, we'll talk more about that a little later. But ran her company for the better part of 5 years until the economy kind of went sideways, as we're in right now. And I had to go get a day job, which now is, I'm a B2B sales and marketing strategist. Yay. Sounds like a cool name, right? I'm the head of market strategy at a company called Decision Council here in Berkeley, California. And we help complex B2B companies in the B2B space with complex products and sales cycles grow and thrive and go to market, sales enablement, strategy, messaging position, all the buzzword stuff, right? As you all, since you were a consultant, you know exactly how fun that is.
Exactly. It's the fun, but necessary things you got to figure out.
Yeah. I mean, and as you know, right, it's like a puzzle. Some of this stuff is really fascinating. Like I won't lie. I give marketing and, I bash them all the time because it's like the inexact science, right? It's this, every marketer I've ever met is just like paranoid, schizophrenic, and just fearful that they're going to be found out as a fraud because they don't even understand why it works, right? But this is the joy and the fun of it, right? Because the strategies we come up with, shape how a company grows. And you can poo-poo marketing and PR, and you can say, oh, we need performance this and performance that, and I'm numbers driven and data driven and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm an engineer. I'm like more data driven than most people. And then you just kind of settle down to the fact that it's really a question of having a solid strategy and trying experiments to figure out what's going to work for you. Because I think we know the space, the solution space on what can be possible, but it's so complicated, and performance marketing is not the answer. Brand building is not the answer. It's like this tapestry, you have to like weave this tapestry because you just honestly don't know what's going to work.
Right. It's what I have found, excuse me, what I have found in my experience, just trying to grow my businesses has been you're a good marketer if you can come up with a structured framework for experimenting, because the entire game is experimentation. Now, obviously, there are, this is how you track do analytics. This is how you track performance. These are the benchmarks. But in terms of what you actually do is an experimentation. And so if you can come up with a very structured way of experimenting and like learning quickly, you become a better marketer. And coming from my background, which is, listen, I was a politics major that found his way in technology and finance. So why am I here? I don't know. But in this world of finance and technology, experimentation really wasn't part of the game. It was all kind of logic, practical, okay, how do you balance, competing priorities? But the marketing, I see the creativity and the art appeal to it. But I also see why someone like an engineer could be very, very successful at it or a scientist, because they have a very solid framework for experimentation.
Yeah. I mean, I think you nailed it, right? It's the scientific method that we learn in engineering school and as scientists that honestly applies to anything related to some sort of input and output, right? And I think I went to grad school, got an MBA, that was step one in the turn to the dark side. It's like, really? You're really going to go do that? I said, well, it's interesting, I'm like, yeah, but I mean, come on, Mitch, like we should just build stuff and people should buy it. And I said, yeah, it's not going to happen. Right? I mean, engineers, right? It's the classic fight between engineering and marketing. That's classic, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I think more marketers should, embrace the scientific method. I just think you're right when it comes to having having a framework to rapidly iterate, figure out the way it's going to go. And I also think I would add to that within the confines of guardrails on what you're doing, which I think is what I say is like B2B storytelling is for me, the guardrails in which to operate those experiments, because a lot of times, and you've probably seen this too, some of these things that marketers do, it's like, why are you doing that? Well, I read a paper about this B2C brand that did it. I'm like, you're B2B, man. You're B2B defense, or you're B2B financial services. Like, how creative? I mean, you could be creative, but like, stay within the guardrails, man. Like, that's the creativity. Is it then creativity is all about constraints under time. Right. Like under a deadline. And that is what I found has been the most useful for me is like set the guardrails and play within the space. And I always like, sports analogy. We were talking about Ted Lasso before we hit record, which I have not seen yet. And I know I'm probably the only one on the planet. I should see it. You've convinced me. I'm just going to do it, because I have a visceral reaction to the uncreativity of all these plus channels. Right. Don't get me started on that. But, like from a sports analogy, it's like, these are the rules of the game and you have to play within the rules. Now, games are played, high performance games are played at the edge of the rule set, always looking for the edge of the rule set, but they're not played outside the rules, right? Because so depending on what you're doing, you need to understand that. And I think that's why the two most powerful things a marketer can do is one, to your point, understand the guardrails, have a framework in which to experiment quickly. And two, really understand your story. Like, what am I telling? What am I trying to get across? Because you see this all the time. It's like these disjointed stories. Are you at this company or that company?
Yeah.
It's like, what are you? Like, fundamental. You need to know that.
Yeah. And I think that, and we're transparently, we're living this right now with Jensel, where we're having these conversations of, okay, is the problem that we're seeing with the business a go-to-market problem or a product problem, right? Because I think there is a easy trap to fall into where you try to solve everything with a new feature or new function. And sometimes it's just stepping back and saying, are we just telling the wrong story Are we not resonating with the audience that we expected to?
Good point.
I always joke and say, I'm not a creative person. I'm super creative within the box, though. If you tell me where I can play and the assumptions that I have to use, I can come up with some madness. It's where you say, it's the art of the possible. That's where I struggle.
Well, I think that's where everyone struggles. And I mean, that's actually a really astute point that most people don't understand about creativity. The best creativity is about constraints. It's 100% true. It has to be. Because you just can't be like, yo, man, like, let's just free to be you and me, you know, man. Like, nothing ever gets done, right? So for me, creativity is constraints on a deadline. You know, I love this show, and this is going to sound silly, but it's Project Runway. I think it was Project Runway, right? You've heard of it, right? You know, where these people are making clothes, right? And it's on a deadline, and it's these different styles. And I'm just fascinated, beyond fascinated, because there's some good, solid work done on a deadline. Like there's no, it has to get done. You're like, okay, do it. That's an artist. That's a creative. The constraints matter a lot. And I think if you've got good constraints and good guardrails, and that means you've defined the problem you're going after, you understand the story you're telling, you're making some decisions, because again, a lot of times marketing, in fact, I was talking to someone about this the other day. It was on LinkedIn, and someone's like, yeah, storytelling doesn't matter. And I'm like, yo, full stop. Like, I don't believe that. It's like, well, it's the rumination on all this creativity, not taking action. And I said, well, I agree with that. The fact is, constraints make you make decisions, and decision making's hard.
Yes.
Because marketers are schizophrenic. They're like so worried about making the wrong decision because everyone's like, what do you do? I mean, we're in the middle of a recession now, right? What's the first thing people do? They cut marketing.
Yeah.
Like, well, we can't measure it. You know, we got to constrain, like financial wonks, folks that all they do is like, figure out the numbers, good on them. But like, there's no, like, soon your finance job will be done by a robot. Because it's rules-based, right? So, but the thing that people don't grasp is again, I think you nailed it, like the framework, the experiments, how fast can I do a cycle of learning? We used to say cycles of learning when I was doing, back in the fab, that's where we made chips. How many cycles of learning is this going to take to solve? That takes commitment and like, this is the plan. And if it's wrong, I'm wrong. Move on. But you're right. Quick iterations within a framework is just super powerful.
Yeah. I was having cycle. Say that one more time. Cycles of
learning.
Cycles of learning. I'm going to have to pull that one into my vernacular, because I was having a conversation yesterday with someone around, not to make this about me, because we'll get back to you, I promise. But we were talking about a business problem, and I kind of told them, I said, I'm very good at incorporating things. I'm good at connecting the dots and being like, you gave me 5 different random things, and I can tell all of these things in a cohesive story that makes all sense. I'm very, very good at that. Where I sometimes struggle and want to get better at is, okay, now this is the picture. Here's the roadmap to make that picture a reality. And then just stick to that plan and execute on that specific plan. Because I tend to, I would say this at work, I'm a good leader. I'm a horrible project manager. And so having that kind of term of cycles of learning, how many cycles of learning will this take? I think is going to be really helpful to me. Just thinking about, hey, there are going to be a couple at bats we have to take. Just because you strike out the first time doesn't mean you need to look for a new thing to like incorporate and pull into the fold. Learning and failing is part of the project plan, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, cycles of learning was the precursor to sprints, agile development. Because I was doing that before Agile even existed, right? And so, but it's similar. So the thing I really like about Agile and Sprint, and in some companies even do this for marketing, which I think is really valid. I really like it. There's parts of it I don't like because it's all about like shipping in 3 weeks, and some products you can't do that. Like if you're building a piece of hardware, hard to do that, complex things. But the general philosophy is really sound. And the reason why cycles of learning always stuck with me is when I was doing semiconductors and we were doing a new technology node, which, the next generation, Moore's law, whatever, we would have to think, okay, how hard is this going to be? And since the cycle time through a fab, if we did an experiment, we're talking in minimum 5 to 6 weeks for an experiment. Like you just had, and they were costing, they cost a lot of money. This was no like recompile away from perfection. This was, I'm going to spend real money and real time waiting for this process to go, and then I've got to test it. So I really had to know the discipline was, we're about to spend $250,000 on this experiment. You better make sure you get something out of it. Whereas, software and marketing things, you're not spending that much money. You're spending it, you have opportunity costs, but you're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the mindset shifts. But the power of thinking of things in, especially innovation and solving a problem as how many cycles of learning, how many sprints, is that then you can kind of quantify along the way. Like, oh, well, hey, this new technology node, as an example, has got like 5 or 6 different process nodes that all have to work, and we've never done them before. Well, that's pretty innovative. So you can apply the same thing to any circumstance. You say, okay, so how do we prove one of these? What's the experiments we need to do in order to say, one of the things was what would be called contacts between metal layers, like how the pitch between contacts in a metal layer. It's a hard problem, right? How are we going to solve that problem? And then we would run experiments to do that. And so if you say, here's the goal we're going to get to, and you break it down into these cycles of learning or these sprints, then, the one, progress happens, and 2, it's the discipline of knowing what the result should be and being like, that didn't work. Yeah. Okay, next,
Right. So, that's helpful to kind of paint that picture and thinking about it as the evolution of Agile, or the evolution to Agile, makes a lot of sense, because I was having similar conversations as a consultant about Agile finance or Agile funding, which is essentially, hey, you're a really big company. You should fund everything like VCs fund startups. Don't give them the whole check up front.
No, just tranche it. Yeah,
tranche it. Like, hey, you try this. Okay, that didn't work. Let's stop. Let's not keep going with this $200 million project. Let's pivot and figure out and reallocate those funds. So it makes a lot of sense. One of the things, one of the things I do want to explore with you is your experience, not only as an entrepreneur, but as like a lead generation expert in finding product market fit. Because I think a lot of the things that we've been talking about is, okay, build your thing fast and try to find out if it works. Well, finding out if it works is product market fit. So I'd like to, what's your framework for early stage, finding product market fit in the early stages of companies? Because it can be very costly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No.
If you do it in an inefficient way.
Yeah. No. And it's hard to do. I mean, that's where companies go to die, right? I mean, great idea, and then no one wants to buy it. Like, I always say now that products are democratized, and that it's all about telling the better story. I mean, best story wins, and what I mean by that is product market fit, marketing, and distribution. That's all that matters now. To a first order. I know product people don't get all bent about Uncle Jarie saying blah, blah, I get it, but there's 10,000 MarTech tools. 10,000. How many AI tools are there going to be? There's like 500 now. They're probably exponentially growing. Do we really need all those silly tools? No, of course not.
Right.
what we need is, of course, those problems to be solved, obviously. And they're all competing to see who's going to win, right? And that's fine. But, I get inundated with all these tools and does this work? Does that work? Et cetera, right? And so I actually came up with this framework. It came from, I first read about it from Superhuman, the email tool. I think the CEO's name is Raul. And he did just a fantastic write-up on his product market fit engine that he built. He got that from somebody else. So obviously this is, all great artists steal, right? So I stole it from him. He stole it from someone else, and this is just the way it works.
Right.
And we've actually implemented this. When I was working at my old firm, one of our clients, Sutro, which is a IoT, it's a water testing robot that floats in your pool. We implemented this there, and it was extremely effective. They still do it to this day, 2 years later. It drives all of their product development, their customer support, their, anything, customer satisfaction, how they're doing. It's in all of their OKRs. It's just a powerful, powerful tool. And it's basically a product market fit survey that combines net promoter score with some fundamental questions about the product. Now, you have to have a little bit of traction in order for this to effectively work. It's hard to do this when you don't have many customers, even if you have free customers, and it doesn't take many. I think if you had, anywhere from 25 to 50 customers, you could probably get some good signal out of this, but the more the better, right? I think to date, the Sutro product market fit survey is probably running about 2,000 respondents out of, I don't know how many. They have a lot, way more customers than that. So, basic premise, which again I got from Raul, who again stole from someone else, is the question that's one of the most important in the whole thing is, if this thing didn't exist, how disappointed would you be? Now, this seems counterintuitive because everyone's like, oh, how great are you, But you want to turn towards the negative because there's this thing called loss aversion. Like, people don't want to lose things, right? If I gave you $10, you'd be like, oh, great. If I stole $10 from you, you're going to be a lot more upset, right? This loss aversion is I would say 5 to 10x stronger emotion.
Yeah.
Primarily because we're wired that way, right? We're wired to prevent loss, prevent us getting killed, right? And generally, positivity and success, the dopamine hits, then it goes away, right? So framing it as the loss is a very powerful thing. And so the answer to that question is only 3 answers: very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed at all. Those are the only 3, right?
Yeah.
And what's really powerful about that single question for product market fit is that it gives you a pretty good indication on how useful your product is and how sticky. And, within reason, people debate, well, I hear all these people say, oh, when you have product market fit because you just know. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, if you're growing 10% a week, of course. But come on, man. Like, I need some practical quantitative measure, not your gut feel, which is, you need your gut feel, but come on, not all of us are a Y Combinator company, right? Come on. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so product market fit survey, that first question, what's interesting is there's some mathematics behind it. And it's this idea called the optimum stopping principle. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this, but it's actually something from computer science. And the idea is that if you are looking for a solution, or you're looking for a house or a girlfriend or whatever, right? There's a point where it's the optimum place to stop looking, and then literally taking the next best offer that's above what you've seen in the past. So what does that mean? Well, if you use the dating analogy and you say, okay, I'm going to live to be 85. I hope, we all hope, right? Or longer. And I'm going to use the optimum stopping principle, right, to pick a mate. then and get married, then I should not get married before I'm 27. Because that's roughly 33% of your life, roughly, right? Or set whatever, do the math, right? And that's a little bit strange. And you're like, well, why is that? Well, it's been proven that given, all things considered, the highest probability of success is to look for about 36% of the time and then take the next bet, take the offer that's better than what you saw in the past, right? You just and you're good, right? And you got a higher probability. Right. Too soon, not so much. Too longer, doesn't matter. It washes out, right? So if you take the optimum stopping principle and you apply it to product market fit, you can reverse the math and you can say, hey, if 36% of the people I've responded would be very disappointed that this does not exist, then that's a high signal that, okay, I'm starting to get product market fit. Now I need to figure out I need to find those people, and then I need to just expand that. And so then the next question you ask is,